longer testing little p. I didn't ask, is the percentage of people who have an IQ of 100 dropped? I asked, has their IQ score dropped? Not the percentage of those that have a certain IQ score, but the IQ score itself. Yes? Yes. That sounds like an average. That doesn't sound like a proportion anymore. Does that make sense? What's another way you can argue that it should be mu? What kind of data do you have with an IQ score? Discrete? Is it discrete? It's definitely continuous. Do you remember why IQ scores are continuous?
Changes all the time.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. It changes all the time. That's true. I think I was smarter when I woke up, and I've gotten so progressively dumber as the day's gone on. I'll be a dribbling idiot by the time I walk out of here at 10 o'clock. What is IQ calculated from? Your mental and chronological ages, which is a measure of big time. How long you've been alive, and how long your brain's intelligence has been alive, I guess, which is that top number. But as long as you're dividing by your chronological age, which is definitely changing all the time, as Austin pointed out. It's a measure. So we're testing mu. Good. So let's define what mu is going to be. Whose mu are we interested in this problem? Whose mu are we interested in? Yes, aren't we? We're interested in the new average IQ score of acute head trauma sufferers. They used to have an IQ of 100. Do they still, or has it dropped? Well, the sample data implies that it's dropped, but that doesn't mean anything. That just means that it could have been a random fluctuation on the curve. It could have just as easily fluctuated 6 points up, maybe, or 3 points up, or 2 points down, or 10 points up. It all depends on, as Veronica said before, how close is close. So that's the question we're answering right now, how close is close. All right, let's make some hypotheses, yes? I think we should, personally. So we've got some null, which is over there, and we've got a research, which we're going to put together. What's my claim? Or what's the article's claim that we're reading about? That it lowers it! So what would that look like symbolically? Help me out.
Mu
Mu
is less than.
is less than? Beautiful! Mu is less than 100. Yes! Do you see how that's similar to the proportion ones we used to do?
Yeah.
The proportion, it's just you put a p in there and you have a percentage. It's exactly the same, except now you've replaced the variable with the proper parameter, which is mu, and you replace the quantity on the other side with the proper continuous variable, which is value, which is 100. Good! What are you guys claiming over here?
It's greater than or
You guys over here say it's probably this. Anybody just puts equals here, that's totally fine too. I like to be mathematical about it and put them both ways like that. That's my vote. So either acute brain injury doesn't change a thing about IQ, or it makes you more intelligent. Which what this would show you, right? Greater than or equals makes you more intelligent. In which case we're all buying 2x4s and smacking ourselves around. Right, dude. Alright, before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, let's talk about the ways to be wrong. The ways to be wrong, and which one you guys could live with the least. So, before we even start, we know that we can make a mistake. And I would say make a mistake, I don't mean a careless mistake. I mean mathematically, we can actually goof up by making an error. So what would a type 1 error be in this case? It's a false positive. That's always what type 1 error is, a false positive. So let's make it also, who do we believe in a false positive? Who do we believe in a false positive test result? You believe the research. The research claims it's going to lower IQ, and you believe that with a positive test result. If it's falsely positive, what does that mean? The research explains that what happened? The research says your data shows that. What does this mean in context? Give me a little more context. What's mu again?
The average of people with head trauma.
So a type 1 error would be that we say that people with acute head trauma have an IQ of less than 100. That would be our positive test result, yes? Positive test result. We say people with acute head trauma have IQs of less than 100. Why would it be false?
They actually don't.
Because they actually don't. That's what makes it a false positive. So a false positive, a type 1 error, would be believing this when you shouldn't have. In words, saying that people with acute head trauma have lowered their IQ when in fact they don't. Or they haven't, I guess. Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, the part after the comma is really quick. When in fact they haven't. That's a false positive. Positive means we say it's been lowered. The false part is that we shouldn't have, because it actually wasn't. False positive test result. Beautiful! Please, Ryder!
I just want to ask about wording. So would it be okay to say brain injury lowers intelligence when it doesn't, or do we
Totally
have
fine.
to-
Totally fine. As long as you understand that that's what your claim would be. So when you
Yeah.
say brain injury, the trick with, I got no problem with you saying it that way, first of all. Grammatically, it's equivalent. But when you say brain injury lowers blah, 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 when it doesn't, it sounds like a contradiction because you're saying both things. I know what you mean, though. But just make sure you can explain that to somebody else if you need to.
Okay.
Like if you're talking about a study with somebody, because make sure you're referring to the claim made in the study. So I'm totally down with it. I can totally get it. So we'll Emily.
Great.
What would a false negative be then? Type 2.
Say people with acute head trauma don't have an IQ less than 100 when they actually do.
Oh! Say that again, Danielle. Nice and loud if you don't mind.
Say people with acute head trauma don't have an IQ less than 100 when they actually do.
That's perfect. I'm going to say it's perfect. Eric, keep talking about Italian. Yes! It was perfectly said! Which one's worse in your opinion?
Type 2.
Vote for type 2? Shelby says yes, type 2. Tell me why you guys, type 2, Danielle's saying yes, type 2 as well. Why would type 2 be worse?
Because it means something's really going downhill.
Yeah, assuming that we think IQ is a good measure of something. That would be missing the lowering of that important something. Which means that what could possibly happen as a result of a type 2 error? Study comes back negative. You know what? The head trauma doesn't lower IQ.
Oh, so let's not wear helmets.
So let's stop wearing helmets when we play lacrosse. Native Americans didn't. They used a little squirrel head, ran around for days without helmets, loincloth. No problem. Take the helmets off. Okay, squirrel head versus lacrosse. I use a lacrosse ball to rub my get my infraspinatus muscle worked out. I did not want to get hit in the face with one of those things coming in whatever 50, 60 miles an hour those things are flying at, yeah? So yes, the implications of that study could be quite great. Katie!
I don't know if I missed this part or not, but how far after the trauma occurred it was?
That's a good question, and since I've lost the source, I can't even check. That's a damn good question. Assume whatever it was controlled for in the group. I don't have a good answer for that, though. I would recommend looking back and finding the data yourself. I wish I had a better answer than that. Great question. Because if you wait long enough, it could correct itself. Is it repeated brain injury? Or is it simply acute first-time brain injury? That's something else, right? Like accumulated injury versus one-time injury. Also is worth talking about. Severity of it. What is traumatic, or what is acute traumatic brain injury? What defines traumatic? You guys are always good at finding that, defining the details of the study. And
When they originally did the IQ test, were they testing people with acute traumatic?
I think I know the answer to that from memory. I think the answer is no. They were testing.
The original, just to have the standard.
Oh, gotcha. So why would they just happen to have these IQ scores before the study? Okay, very good research questions. I'm focusing more on mechanics, but I love the fact you're asking these questions. These are good. These are good, yes? Other questions like that. So we got some votes for type 2 is worse? Okay, so those of you that say type 2 is worse, what might you want to do? You might want to lower confidence, yes? Now before we take our 5, let's make sure, because I want to come back in and actually start doing the test soon. If you're afraid of a type 2, and I'm with you, do you 3 with your reasons? I like the 3. Anybody okay with that? With saying type 2 is worse, I'm going to analyze that one. That means you believe that somewhere down here there is another curve that represents this lowered IQ score, yes? I'm going to draw it just randomly down here. You think it's down here somewhere, yes? So a type 2 error, you want to make sure that if your data lands on that curve, that you know it's on that curve. Well, here's the problem. If you set the critical value too far left, too far to the left, which would be minimizing a type 1 error, you run the risk of cutting off so much of that curve that you're going to land in the type 2 side. Because you got to remember, whatever critical value, whatever cutoff value you use for one curve is also going to be used for the other curve. You've laid a line in the sand, and it has to work for both curves. So take the data out for a second. Take the data out for a second. Go back to my pockets. This curve goes on forever, and so does the yellow one. If you say type 1 error is terrible, nobody said that yet. Does anybody say type 1 error is the worst case scenario of this? False positive? IQ doesn't mean anything, therefore I don't care about type 1 error? No? Okay. Well, if you pick 95% confidence, or 99% confidence, Crowley test, you're going to shove that cutoff way out here. Well, the problem with shoving it way out here is you've also made a very large tail on the other curve, which represents beta, which is the type 2 error. Alpha is a type 1 error, that little Greek symbol in your little paragraph there, that little alpha symbol. That's the opposite of confidence. It's a significance. And that just means you're testing at 5%. You're testing at 95% confidence. Well, if you shove this bad boy over there to trap 5% in a tail, or whatever you decide to test, the further you shove that, the further you're encroaching into the alternate hypothesis curve if it's down here. And this tail right here is the beta tail, the type 2 error tail. So you can see, the further you shove this way, the bigger that type 2 error is getting, yes? So what's the only way to minimize type 2 error? What should we do with this line? Bring it back this way. Well, of course, if you're bringing it back this way, this is what the quiz for Wednesday or Thursday has you exploring, FYI. Sliding this thing back and forth. If you slide it back this way, you're obviously letting a lot more of that curve be in the true positive range. Yes, that's a true positive over there. But you're also creating an awful lot of false positive probability. But you guys said you don't care about that. You're not worried about false positive. You're worried about false negatives. So to minimize false negatives, lower your confidence. Shoot, bring this guy back over here, make it at 90 or 85 or something like that. You might have a hard time getting your research published. But from what I understand, that's a good thing. Because you're actually publishing true positive rates at a higher rate, if you will. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's what you got to think about. It's what most textbooks don't talk about. But researchers are talking about it more and more and more. It's part of that redesign of curriculum thing we're talking about. So, if you can't live with type 2, lower your confidence. Again, you might have a hard time publishing your results, but you might have a lot better karma because you're actually putting data out in the world that is helping people. What's more important? It's about that, really, if you think about it. Let's take 5, yes? And let's start doing the test. Di, I have not forgotten your statement. I have not forgotten it.